Today and the 2 days after today, yes, you heard that right, we're gonna do comic critiques. I want to thank everybody who's sending comic pages for me to critique. I have 5 pages for you, and I decided to actually split these critiques into 3 videos because it took a little while. I like to go deep with my critiques. It's what I do in my mentoring programs. It's what I do in my live courses, and it's what I did with these pages. And I was like, I could make it an entire video, but that was going to be almost an hour long, and I thought that was just a little too long. So I split the video and the critiques into 3 videos that I'm going to upload during the entirety of Christmas. Because today it's Christmas Eve, tomorrow's Christmas, and the day after tomorrow is second Christmas Day. Yes, that is an actual thing in the Netherlands. It's still a holiday, so it's still Christmas, basically. So, 3 videos this week. I didn't want to make anybody wait for their critiques. Here we are. I told you it was going to be a Christmas special. Quick introduction, if you don't know me, my name is Enrique and I make and teach comics. And if you want to make your own comics in 2021, you want to make that the year you're going to start your comic, then subscribe to this YouTube channel. You can also get a checklist that guides you through the entire pre-production process of the comic, and that gets you all ready for making your comic pages. You can go to pencilsandstories.com/extra to get it. Without further ado, let's dive into the first critiques, and I will see you tomorrow. So this first page is by Gumshoe Comics with an X on Twitter, and the comic's name is Guardians of Man, and this is the first page of the first chapter, so thank you so much for sending in your very first page. It's a very intriguing scene. From what I can tell is there is a character, which I assume is the main character, and they're sitting in what looks like an ambulance in the first panel, and so you slowly zoom in, which I really like, and then you get to this. It's either a memory or in thought they are at a different place, which is a really intriguing thing for a first page. So I would be curious to see where this is going and what this character is experiencing right now. I do like that you play with having a panel stretch out over the entire page, and that you put your panels on top. That can sometimes be a little, the panels can sometimes feel a little disjointed, but you really made it very symmetrical, put them right on top of the center of each other. So I think it works well on this page. This is going to be a webcomic on a website. One little thing that I would want to give you as a tip is if you ever want to print it, start thinking about that right now. If you ever think, I'm going to print it as a traditional comic, what would happen is if you would split this in half, you would make it a 2-page spread, then obviously this panel is going to stretch out over here, which looks a little awkward. I would keep these kinds of panels on one side of the page. For now, I'm just going to assume this is going to be a web comic only. You're going to put it on your website, and this is just one. This is your first page. Also, the colors really stand out. You're working with blue and yellow here, which is a really nice contrast. You know, the cool and the warm. Very saturated, so it really jumps at you. It's also really the first thing you're going to see if you see this page. So, of course, you have these really thick lines, which is like a really interesting thing because you have this outline, which is literally the same size as the border, which is a nice touch. I would say use it sparingly because you are kind of connecting the line art of this and the panels together. I think it works really well for this because otherwise the panel would be an incredibly large overlap on top of maybe the more subtle line art. I do see that you've used it here a bit as well. It turns your comic very graphic, which can give you a nice look. I think you want to keep this kind of thick line art that's literally the same size as the lines of your panels a little bit more sparingly because you are connecting the character with the panel in this case. You're making it a really graphic shape, which is nice in terms of composition, but it also really connects these things together. So you make you bring the character really, really forward and you would run the risk, if you have like a thinner background lines, you would run the risk of disconnecting the character from the background. For example, I think that happened here a little. If you look at the first panel on this page, like the smaller panel, if you really zoom out, especially also since you gave the character a different tint of grayish blue and also thicker lines than the background, I think the character is starting to disconnect from the background, and it really feels like they are floating. They are floating in this panel. They're not really sitting, because they are sitting kind of like here. A shadow here would be a good thing to ground them already, I think. But, you know, it really disconnects them. And then you have a line here, and then you really have a tendency to connect all of these lines that really are not connected. She is really blending into this door, and it's not really like, either give her the thick outline or do it with the door, but then you have a character on top which has thinner lines on top of something that has really thick lines, so it doesn't really match up. And here it's the same thing. You're connecting this door with the ground, but actually this door is disconnected from the ground, like it's in front of it, you know, it has overlap. So why is this the same thickness as the door that's closer to us, closer to the camera? And then here you have a couch in the back that suddenly has very thick lines. So I'm not quite sure what you're doing there. Maybe the shape wasn't as clear. And I think that has more to do with the fact that you did not color this background at all. And I think you needed this for the story, because this character is not really there. That's the feeling I get from this character. This character is in their own world, in their own head. So they're not really there. But for us, because we're getting into this story, I think it would have been stronger if you would maybe have colored this background, or at least used tints of gray to kind of, not really shade it, but to kind of separate the separate elements. For example, because this is an ambulance, so I'm assuming those are lights here. So maybe, you know, give some context here, and then especially with this character, since she is kind of like tending to this main character, I would maybe just give her the same. Because we need to set the scene, so to say, in our brains of like, hey, what's happening here? You know, and then maybe she has a little bit lighter hair, you know, that kind of stuff. You can still play around with the contrast between these characters, like maybe it is very light in here, and she's standing in front of the door, which is not as light, so you would have a natural like contrast between this character and the background. And then they're sitting on the ground. I really want to put some shadow here to ground them. You know, and maybe make it a little less jarring like that. And then some darker stuff here to really let them sit. Because for us, there's a character sitting in an ambulance, but like the background was hardly even visible at all. You know, and it really doesn't make a lot of sense in this case. I know I did it, but in this case, that this character doesn't have like that outline. So we are kind of like eased into the scene, and then it would be nicer to kind of have this background kind of disappear. My only problem with that is that this character is doing an action. And I know that this character is not noticing that she does that. So it makes sense for her not to be, you know, super dominant and overstaging the scene, but would have something in between this panel and this panel. Something that makes a transition almost to a panel where, yes, the background is actually gone. And you know, they really blend, like they blend in with the background as well. Like they are not here. So I really love this panel, but I would ideally ease us into almost like going into their minds. Like going from the first panel, which is a normal scene for us, normal. There's like a person sitting on an ambulance, in an ambulance like entrance, to we are going closer to the character. Really nice, by the way, how I did this with the transition of like having them almost full body, and then from the waist up, and then the close up. That works really well. But then take us inside their minds in a more gradual way, and start out with something that's more grounded in reality, and then the reality is shifting, and then the reality is gone, and we're going into what I assume we're going into, their minds. And we start the story. To set the scene, because this background wasn't colored before, I really had to go in and see, oh, he's actually in an ambulance. That wasn't the first thing that I saw. I had to go see what those lines were, and then I was like, oh, it's an ambulance. And that is actually, like, we need that information. That's important information, I assume. That this character just had an accident, or they became ill or something. So it's important. It's an important part of the story. I'm not quite sure what the rest of your coloring is going to look like for the comic. It seems like you're going monochrome, which is a really nice time saver, and you know, could be really interesting. Like, this is interesting to me to look at, with the yellow and then the red shading, which is kind of like a hint to this, which connects these two things together, which is really nice. But then I would say your backgrounds could use a little bit more work, especially here, and also be mindful of tangents. This hand is setting very uncomfortably close to this line and this line, and then you have something here which I would probably not have added in because it's not really necessary. I know that there is a window here, and I know that you know that the window is there, so it should be there. I would just have dropped the line entirely, or put it here, and then, you know, something like this. So there's less lines going on, because that gets kind of confusing. In here, this line is very uncomfortably close to the character. So the character starts like this is creating tension. And since the character is kind of spacing out, I would probably maybe even leave this line out, especially if you didn't like color it in. It doesn't really matter if this line is here. Just leave it out entirely, or put it way more to the side. And again, doesn't really matter if it's not completely correct in terms of how your layout is. We're thinking more about composition and less about accuracy when it comes to comics. At least that's what I would do. To make it easier for yourself, I would maybe just think in terms of far background, you know, middle ground, and then foreground. And then the foreground has the thickest lines, then a little less thick in the middle ground, and then thin lines in the background. Yeah, overall intriguing first page. I'm really curious to see what happens next and what this character is experiencing. Well done. So this is a comic by Christie, and it's called Extra. First of all, I love the little fox character. Like, foxes are the best. So I really, really love, you know, their design. Their little cute teeth here at the bottom, and you know, they're super poofy, and I love that. And then we have another character with like cute ears. Really, really nice. First off, more traditional kind of comic page. Really like how spontaneous it all looks, like your art style, also the expressions of the characters and the movements look very spontaneous, which I really like. And what I also like on this page, I didn't check what your normal like shading style is, but what I do like is that you use colored shadows, and they look really pretty on this page, especially like this one. I really like the shadows on this. And also here you see like specks of pink, you know, everywhere, and then the shadows are kind of like, I guess a little purplish as well. It goes to blue sometimes. There's this really nice pink, purple, blue kind of setting, which I really like. And then you contrast it here with like the green, which is interesting. It's an interesting color combo, like pink and green especially. It's like, you don't see it a lot. I do like that you give us like an indication of the background. So we know you probably established the scene more in the previous page, but we still kind of know, especially because this character is like running to and from this area. And it's nice to see what they're running towards and what they're running away from in these kind of panels. One thing that I also really liked is this, I guess it's like, it's an onomatopoeia is what you call it officially. It was like kind of like a sound effect. I do like that you made it a really broad movement and a broad kind of like sound. It goes all the way here through the action of actually chomping on the tail and then all the way here. I really love the flow of this as well. This is a really, really lovely panel. One thing in comics that gets kind of tricky when you're doing scenes where characters are like this, like they're running away and then they're turning around and then a character comes on to a different part, like they are going this way and then, you know, chomping him in the tail and then running back again. Like one thing that gets really confusing sometimes is your camera angle, and that has to do with the 180 rule, which is a thing used in comics and in film to make sure that your camera angles, or mostly is used to make sure that your characters stay on the right side of the screen, or in this case on the panel. You can see that here the Fox character is always on the left side of the panel, and that keeps us from being confused when there's like action going on, like this character turning around and everything. But they are always in the right side of the screen at all times, and that keeps it being really consistent. The only thing you need to look out for, and I think it was successful here, but it can get kind of confusing, is because this character ran away and then turned around, and then my brain was slightly confused of like, which way are they facing here? Are they still turned around, like in this panel? Or are they trying to run away again? Because the Fox character is coming from this side specifically, it looks like this character is still turned around. And now they're coming from, or like from our view, from the background, and they come into the foreground and chomp him on the tail. But also still keep the 180 rule intact. And that's the only way it works. If you have two characters, like we have here, like the party is going on over here. This is a Fox character, which is not really clear because this person has ears as well. Here's the other person. You would pull an imaginary line between the two like this, and you would place the camera on one side of the line. Like sometimes you place it here, sometimes you place it here, and sometimes you place it here. And from here, that would mean that, you know, if you look like this, the Fox character is always on the left, and then the person character with the ears is always on the right. And then same from here. Fox character is still on the left, and the other person is still here. And from here, same thing. This is a person, and the Fox character is over here. So you see the character constantly stays on the left. My only thing that would make it even more clear, if you would have turned this character, because we're now facing him like full on his back, you know, and since this character seems to be coming from the more leftish because of the way their movement is going, and we see this person from the back, I was slightly confused because I was like, where is he coming from, and did this person turn around or not? You know, if you've maybe put him a little bit more, you know, a little bit more to the side, like it made me wonder, I don't know, it made me wonder where he was in the space. And then I do like that he's like going up against the frame here, because we're focusing on this action, I would, I feel like these shapes are all a little too close to each other. I would have like a little bit more space, because this character is running away, and they seem way more apart from each other in this panel than this panel. You know, this is a very spacious panel, and then this is very, I don't know, it feels a little bit cramped. That's because of the speech balloon. That I feel like you didn't necessarily have too much space for. Would have maybe made this character a tiny bit smaller, but then again, I do realize that you wanted to focus on both of their expressions. But maybe, you know, something like this would have worked. You didn't really necessarily need all of this. So the character could have been placed a little bit more towards here, a little bit larger, and then you would have a little bit more space for the word balloon. And another last point I wanted to make was about your shading. I know it's part of your style. It's very, very hard. You know, it's very hard. This is what you call cell shading. There's like no blending. Everything is just these hard-edged shadow, which works really nicely, I think, for your style. I really, really like it. I like the colors that you use. I would like to see you do less of this. You know, all these small little shapes. And have more, like here you have this big, nice shadow shape. And then a nice shape here as well. As opposed to all these little shapes here in the hair. Like, I have a video about that. About me critiquing one of my own pages, and I did this heavily as well. It gives a lot of texture on the page, and it makes it look a little busy. You know, you see it here in the shadows as well. All these little shapes, which means you get a lot of, like here it's very nice. Like I know he has like backlighting, and it makes the shadow like a really big shape. But I would like to see you do more of these kinds of like, more easy on the eye shadows, I would almost say. Like this tail too, like there's so much texture, and the tail is very important in this panel. So here it kind of makes sense, but then make sure that you don't put like a lot of little shapes in places where it doesn't really matter. You know? You know, so you still need shadow, but then make it one big shape. More like this. And then save the little texture, like the little lines, for the stuff that matters in that panel. Because that will draw attention. A lot texture, in general, like, will draw attention. And especially in shadow, like there's not much detail in shadow. I would even say that you don't need this extra shadow shape here. Like you have two shadow shapes inside of each other, and with this amount of light, usually there's not many shadow shapes and not much subtlety and detail in the shadows. That is more something for a clear day when you're outside. In an environment like this, that would probably not, like, you will save a lot of time for yourself by just doing one shadow shape. You know what I mean? And then look at grouping shadows together and making them more shapes than texture, I would say. But well done, nicely done. I really like this page, and good luck with your comic. Those were the critiques of today. Be sure to check in tomorrow and the day after to watch the other critiques and to learn something from your fellow comic peers. Give the comics of today some love. Go to the links in the description and subscribe / follow / send them a nice message about their pages. Read their comics, and I will see you guys tomorrow.